He left us to survive alone. Now that we made it without him, he wants a piece of the life he didn't build. I loved him even when everything in me begged to stop. I loved him through the late nights when he came home smelling like cheap beer and excuses. I loved him when he spent whole weekends sunk into a couch, a controller glued to his hand while dishes piled up and bills gathered dust on the kitchen counter. I loved him when he promised that work was just around the corner, that the next interview would change everything, that one day he'd make me proud. I held on so tight to that dream that it started cutting into my palms. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought it would be the thing that finally woke him up. I imagined him seeing those 2 pink lines and realizing he had something real to fight for. He smiled when I told him, pulled me into a hug so tight I thought maybe, just maybe, I hadn't made a mistake. He promised it would all be different now. That he'd step up. That he'd find a better job. That we'd get married before the baby came, simple and small, just us and a couple of friends. I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative meant admitting I had built my life on a hollow promise. The months crawled by. I grew heavier, slower. He grew more distant, staying out later, brushing off responsibilities with a lazy kiss on my forehead and a mumbled, "You worry too much." I went to doctor appointments alone. I set up the crib alone. I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover groceries while he spent nights with his friends. I swallowed the loneliness because what else could I do? I loved him. I chose him. I thought choosing meant staying even when it hurt. Then, the night our son was born, I sat in the hospital bed, sweaty and broken and exhausted, waiting for him to walk through the door. He came 3 hours late, reeking of whiskey, holding a wilted gas station bouquet. I should have known then. I should have known. But I still smiled. I still said, "Look, he has your eyes," like that could stitch the cracks back together. It didn't. 3 weeks later, while I was nursing the baby at 2 in the morning, still bleeding, still half broken inside, he packed a backpack, mumbled something about needing space, and walked out. Just like that. No fight. No apology. Just the soft click of the door closing behind him. His parents didn't even bother calling. When I finally got the courage to reach out, his mother sighed and said, "He's young. You should have known." Like I had tricked myself into believing I deserved better. Like it was my fault for dreaming too big. I cried one time. Just once. Silent, messy tears in the bathroom with the shower running so my son wouldn't hear me breaking. Then I wiped my face, packed what little pride I had left, and went home to my parents. It wasn't a home, really. Just a house that smelled like old cigarettes and broken dreams. But it had walls. It had a door I could lock at night. It had just enough space for a broken girl and her newborn son to start over. And that would have to be enough. The first months back home felt like drowning in slow motion. I slept on a broken pull-out couch in the living room, my son's crib squeezed into the corner between the TV and a stack of boxes my parents never bothered to unpack. Some nights the walls shook from their arguments, the same old dance they'd been stuck in for decades: blame, silence, booze, repeat. I kept my head down. I made bottles in the dark. I sang lullabies over the sound of breaking glass in the kitchen. Every day I promised myself, just survive today. Nothing more. Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about the life I thought I would have. Somewhere in the middle of the exhaustion, the shame, the endless cycle of diapers and secondhand guilt, something hard and small started growing inside me. A stubborn, angry seed that whispered, "This will not be your son's life." I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have connections. Hell, I didn't even have decent clothes for an interview. But I had Wi-Fi and a second-hand laptop with a missing key, and that would have to be enough. I signed up for every free online course I could find. I studied during feedings, during naps, while the house slept off another drunk night. I learned about spreadsheets, customer service, basic coding, virtual assistants. Anything that might get me a foot in the door somewhere. My first job was data entry for a company I never met in person. Paid peanuts. But it was mine. Every dollar I earned, I tucked away like it was gold. Slowly, painfully, the fog started lifting. A year later, I was working full-time remote, juggling contracts, answering emails while my son stacked toy blocks at my feet. I saved every cent I could. Scraped together enough for a used car that didn't smell like mold. Saved enough to fix up my parents' spare bedroom, new paint, new crib, curtains that actually kept the cold out. It wasn't much. But it was ours. Some mornings I still woke up expecting everything to collapse, half convinced I didn't deserve this tiny slice of peace. But then my son would laugh, that open, unguarded laugh that only little kids have, and I would remind myself that I was building something better. Brick by brick. Day by brutal day. When he started preschool, I cried harder than he did. It felt like cutting off a piece of myself. But it also felt like hope. Like a real beginning. And somewhere between drop-offs and deadlines, between exhaustion and tiny victories, life started to feel less like survival and more like living. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day where everything felt almost normal. I had just picked up my son from preschool, and we were laughing about some story he made up about dinosaurs driving school buses, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't want anything breaking the fragile good mood wrapped around us like a blanket. Later that night, after he fell asleep with his favorite stuffed animal tucked under his chin, I listened to the message. It was him. His voice. Somehow both familiar and foreign at the same time. "I want to see my son," he said, like he had the right, like the last 3 years hadn't happened. Like he hadn't vanished when I needed him most. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask. He demanded. My hands shook as I deleted the voicemail without replying. I told myself it was a fluke, a one-time thing, that he'd get bored and disappear again. I wanted it to be over. But the text started. Then the emails. Then a letter, thick and official looking, shoved into my mailbox. He was suing for visitation rights. I sat on the kitchen floor staring at the papers while the microwave hummed behind me, heating up leftovers for a dinner I suddenly couldn't eat. Fear settled in my stomach like a stone. I didn't know if the courts would care about the nights I rocked our son to sleep alone. About the diapers I bought with change from the bottom of my purse. About the birthdays and Christmases and tiny scraped knees he missed because he chose to be somewhere else. All they would see was a name on a birth certificate he didn't earn. For a few days, I crumbled. Snapped at my parents. Cried in the shower. Woke up gasping in the middle of the night, heart hammering like it was trying to break free from my chest. But then I looked at my son, at the way he trusted the world, at the way he trusted me, and I knew I had no choice. I would fight. Not for revenge. Not for anger. But because he deserved better than someone who only showed up when it was convenient. He deserved a mother who would protect him, no matter how much it hurt. So I hired a lawyer. I gathered every receipt, every email, every silent birthday. I wrote down everything, not to weaponize it, but to tell the truth. If he wanted to come back into our lives, he was going to have to earn it. And I was ready to make damn sure he never hurt my son the way he had hurt me. The courtroom smelled like dust and old paper and fear. I sat at the table next to my lawyer, fingers laced so tightly together they ached, trying to breathe like a normal person while he sat across the room, tapping his foot like he was waiting for a table at a restaurant. No apology. No regret. Just entitlement thick in the air around him. They asked him questions first. Why he left. Why he never paid support. Why he never visited. He shrugged through it all, said he wasn't ready, said he was scared, said he was young. Like fear gave him permission to disappear. Like time erased everything. When it was my turn, my lawyer handed over the timeline, dates, receipts, screenshots. Proof of every moment I was alone, every moment he chose something else. I kept my voice steady when I spoke because I wasn't there to perform. I was there to protect my son. I told them the truth. How he left. How he stayed gone. How we built a life without him, day after day after day. The judge listened without giving anything away, but I saw something shift in his eyes when I described the birthdays missed, the nights spent rocking a fevered baby alone, the way my son stopped asking about his father by the time he could form full sentences. When the decision came, it was almost anticlimactic. The court confirmed his biological rights, but visits would be supervised only. Strict conditions. Regular evaluations. A long, slow path if he wanted to be any kind of presence. No overnight visits. No weekends. No sudden drop-ins. My son's safety came first. His rage was immediate. He exploded in the hallway, shouting that I turned his son against him, that I poisoned everything. Security stepped in. I watched it all calmly, like through a window, detached and steady for the first time in years. When it was finally over, I stepped outside into the cold air and took the deepest breath of my life. The sun was sinking behind the courthouse, gold and heavy, and for once it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like a beginning. I wasn't the broken girl he left behind anymore. I wasn't the scared kid who thought love meant bleeding yourself dry for someone else. I was a mother. I was a fighter. I had built a life from ash and bad memories, and no one, was ever going to take it from me again. I thought love was supposed to feel heavy. Like sacrifice. Like carrying two people's dreams on your back until your knees gave out. That's what I told myself when I followed him across the state line at 18, leaving behind a college acceptance letter and everything that might have been. He said we were building a life together, said someday it would all pay off, said we'd laugh about the hard times while drinking wine on the porch of the house we'd buy with his startup millions. I believed him because I needed to believe in something. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs, waitressing, cleaning houses, temping in offices that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. I paid the rent, kept the lights on, filled the fridge. He stayed home, working on projects that never seemed to get finished, making calls to investors that never called back. Every month he promised, next month will be different. Bigger things were coming. I just had to be patient. I just had to keep believing. So I did. I kept believing until it hollowed me out, until every time I checked the mailbox and found another overdue bill, it felt like I was swallowing glass. Still, I stayed. Because leaving felt like failure. Because somewhere along the way, he had convinced me that if I gave up on him, I was giving up on us. And I didn't want to be the villain in the story we had written together. I wanted to be the girl who stayed through the storm and got rewarded with sunlight. But the sunlight never came. Only more bills, more broken promises, more silent dinners where he stared at his phone and I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I told myself it was just a rough patch. That real love meant surviving the rough patches. That leaving would mean I was selfish. Until the day I lost my job. I came home early, eyes swollen from crying in the car, heart pounding so hard it hurt to breathe. I told him what happened, voice shaking, waiting for him to hug me, to say it would be okay, to finally step up. Instead, he threw up his hands and said, "Great. Now you're just dead weight too." The words hit harder than anything else ever had. Not because they were loud. But because they were true, at least to him. I wasn't a partner. I was a wallet. I was a fallback plan. I was the one who paid the bills while he chased dreams he never planned to share. I packed that night. 2 suitcases and a cracked laptop. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a door closing soft behind me. And for the first time in years, the air tasted clean. The first nights alone were the hardest. Not because I missed him, that part had rotted away long before I left, but because silence is loud when you're used to drowning in someone else's noise. I rented a room the size of a closet above a laundromat that never seemed to close, so all night long the building shook with the sound of spinning drums and clinking coins. The mattress sagged in the middle, the window let in more cold air than light, and every creak of the floorboards reminded me that I had nothing left to lose. I cried the first night. The second night, too. I cried until my eyes ached, until there was nothing left but emptiness where all the fear used to live. And then, I started moving. I updated my resume on a borrowed laptop at the library. I walked for hours handing out applications. I scrubbed dishes in a diner, worked the register at a gas station, anything that kept the lights on and the landlord off my back. It wasn't glamorous. Some days it barely felt like surviving. But every time I wanted to quit, every time the old voice whispered that maybe I had made a mistake, I looked at the tiny crack in the ceiling over my bed and told myself, "You chose this. You fought for this. Keep going." Little by little, the world stopped feeling like it was pressing down on my chest. I found a better job, answering phones for a shipping company that paid just enough to move into a real studio apartment. I bought a couch secondhand from a woman who cried when I told her I was starting over. I taught myself how to fix leaky faucets, how to patch a hole in the wall, how to change the oil in my beat-up car. I was exhausted all the time. I was lonely a lot. But I was free. And then, somewhere between the endless shifts and the frozen dinners, I met someone new. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a love story written in the stars. It was just a guy at work who noticed when I stayed late, who asked if I needed help carrying a heavy box, who didn't expect anything from me except honesty. We started slow. Coffee breaks. Stupid jokes. Long talks in the parking lot while the sky turned purple with sunset. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. I was still learning how to trust my own voice again, how to believe that someone could see me as more than just a way to keep themselves afloat. But for the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel like a lie. It had been almost a year since I left him when the past came clawing at my door again. It started with a text. No hello. No apology. Just 2 words that sent my stomach into knots. We should talk. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I thought about deleting it. Pretending it never happened. But I knew better. Ghosts don't disappear because you close your eyes. A few days later, I saw him. By accident, or maybe not. I was coming out of the grocery store, juggling bags, when I caught sight of him leaning against the hood of a car across the parking lot. He looked different. Rougher around the edges. The same lazy smirk, though, the same eyes that once talked me into believing in things that never existed. He walked up like no time had passed, like he hadn't burned our entire world to the ground. Said he missed me. Said he made mistakes. Said he wanted to make things right. I didn't say anything at first. Just watched the way he shifted from foot to foot, the way his hands twitched like he expected me to fold right there on the pavement. Part of me almost did. Not because I wanted him back, that part of me had died a long time ago, but because old habits die slow, and for a second I felt the ghost of the girl who always said yes, who always gave one more chance, even when it cost her everything. But she wasn't in charge anymore. You need to leave, I said, steady as stone. We have nothing to talk about. His face twisted into something ugly. The apologies dried up. The accusations started. He said I owed him. Said I abandoned him. Said I was selfish. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just turned my back, walked to my car, and drove away. Hands shaking. Heart pounding. But I didn't look back. Not even once. I thought that was the end of it. But people like him don't give up because they care. They give up because they lose control. A week later I got served. Legal papers. He was suing me for money he claimed he was owed. For the rent I paid. For the groceries. For the years I supported us both. It didn't even make sense. But sense wasn't the point. He wanted to punish me for leaving. For surviving without him. For building a life where he no longer fit. And now I had to fight for it all over again. The court day felt different this time. I wasn't the girl who had begged him to stay, who had shrunk herself small enough to fit into the cracks of his empty promises. I wore my best clothes, stood straight even when my hands trembled, and reminded myself over and over, I didn't owe him anything. Not my time. Not my fear. Not my life. His lawyer tried to spin a story where he was the victim, tried to paint me as manipulative, as ungrateful. Said I took advantage of his generosity. That word almost made me laugh out loud. Generosity. The judge listened without giving anything away, flipping through the thick stack of papers my lawyer had prepared, bank statements, leases, payment records, every single receipt showing that I was the one who kept us afloat while he chased his imaginary dreams. I sat there, still as stone, while they dragged my past into the light, piece by piece. But this time, shame didn't crawl under my skin. I wasn't the one who should feel small. When it was finally my turn to speak, I told the truth. Not with anger. Not with tears. Just plain, simple truth. How I worked 3 jobs to pay our rent. How I ate ramen for a year so he could have a car he didn't bother to register. How I believed in him long after he stopped believing in anything but his own comfort. And how, finally, I chose myself. The judge didn't even hesitate. Case dismissed. His claims were called baseless and abusive. He was warned not to contact me again or face legal consequences. When the gavel dropped, it sounded like thunder in my chest. Outside the courthouse, he tried to catch up to me, shouting my name, demanding to talk, to explain. I didn't even slow down. I walked right past him, into the sunlight, into the life I had built with my own bruised hands. The life he didn't get to touch. That night, sitting alone on my second-hand couch, I looked around my tiny apartment, the chipped coffee table, the lopsided bookshelf, the photo of me and my co-workers pinned to the fridge, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something bigger than fear. I felt proud. He had tried to drag me back down. He had tried to remind me who I used to be. But he was too late. That girl was gone. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't scared. I was free. Subscribe, hit the like button, and explore more fascinating stories.